Are live. Good morning. It is Friday. Yay. I have another pastor joke today.
Far away.
So, pastor is preaching his Sunday sermon, and he said, church, he said, next Sunday, I want to talk about the spirit of lying. He said, but to get us all prepared and, flowing in the same vein, I want everybody throughout the week to read the whole book of Mark. Next Sunday comes along, and he said, I just want to see a show of hands. This one really blessed me. How many of you read Mark chapter 17? Pretty much the whole church just read the amen. Oh, yeah. And he said, and now I will start my sermon on lying because Mark only has 16 chapters.
There you go. We should do that. Oh my goodness. That's more than a joke. That's real life. Oh, that's great. Well,
snuck up on you this Friday morning.
Yeah. Well, welcome everybody to Hope for the Soul. We hope everybody's had a good week, and we're honored that you've tuned in. Today we are going to have a Q&A. And as always, it's my dad and I and Kayla, and this is week 3 of having Alex on the show. And
hey,
so,
Alex.
What up, Alex? Talk to the people.
Hello, everyone.
That's it. Just hello, everyone. That's it. No talking, just salutations. So today, Alex is going to kind of drive the episode. We're giving her the steering wheel, and we're going to have a Q&A. And who knows where this is going to go. She sent me and Dad the questions, and I briefly looked at the first couple, and that's all I know. So we're flying in the dark, and it's going to be a fun episode. So far away, Alex. Or Dad, you want to say anything?
Before we go any further, thank you for joining us on Hope for the Soul. Like, subscribe, follow, punch that button. You know how it works, but we need you to tell somebody else about us. And
tell somebody else about us. Oh, my goodness.
No, the other Sunday, I was making announcements, and I made reference to the couple about to get married, and I thought I misspoke, and I couldn't understand. I thought that I had called the bride by a different name, and then I realized that I didn't make that mistake. I was very, very relieved.
No, you said that they're getting married in a few days. Well, it's a month. Well,
when you're trying to be a Christian,
when you're trying to maintain purity,
a month is a long time. It's not a few days. I understand.
No, that's 30 sleeps, Dad.
That's a long time. Moving right along, and the church said amen.
I think
amen.
The day that this airs, they'll have 7 days. So come on, somebody. Alex, you better go.
Okay, so we reached out on Instagram. I personally reached out to a few friends, like my age, and then I thought of some questions as well. So we're going to start off with the first one. What is the difference between a leader and a manager?
Can I go?
Far away.
Okay, here is my take on it. A manager manages their area. A leader has a vision to go beyond that area.
Absolutely.
In a short answer.
That's all you got?
Yeah,
That's it?
I think you can go even like in a secular setting or in a church setting. I think manager can just be like a title and a position that you're filling. And leader, you can be a leader without a title. You can be a leader in the space that you're at. So I think that's like, I know you can recognize leadership abilities within people that don't have a title
That's
yet,
right.
or it's not being recognized.
There are people here at Conroe Church who do not have, when we meet, what is it, once a month, once every 6 weeks, 8 weeks, depending on what time of year it is, when our leadership team meets, there's some of the strongest leaders in our church who are not in that leadership meeting. Yeah. And it's not that they're not great leaders, it's not that they're issues, but sometimes you want people of influence not at the leadership table, not in a positional role. That way they can help. Influence is always greater than position, and position is great and needed. I think, piggybacking off of what Kayla said, managers maintain, and a lot of times people like me and other strong leaders, not saying that I'm just a great, amazing leader, because I have a lot of growing to do, but we can cast off on a manager like they're less than. I think it's important that people like me and Dad, and even you, Kayla, who are big people, big vision people, a lot of times the details get lost, but we need someone like Alex who will help us manage and maintain and build out systems and processes that will allow the vision to come to life. And that will create a pathway and an avenue for people to walk out what God has given us in the church setting. And obviously you can take this to the corporate setting, and you've got people that's taking new ground, getting new business, building new relationships, but you have to have the structure in-house to maintain the meat that you're going and killing and bringing back for everyone to eat.
So what you're saying then is a leader is going to be this big picture person, throwing out ideas, throwing out dreams, vision casting. But the manager is that person who can catch the dream and manage the details. And somebody, I mean, we want to get the lights turned on, but somebody needs to flip the switch. And so we'll say, let's get this place lit up, and we need lights, and we need to brighten up. And the manager says, okay, let's go over there and turn the switch on.
And I think sometimes it's not that a vision can't be a good manager and a good manager can't be a leader. There are people who are blessed with both, and oh my goodness, that's kind of what I want to become and what I'm striving for. But a lot of times visionaries and strong leaders are weak in the area of building systems and creating process for other people to come along that really sustain the growth.
And I like what Alex said too, that leadership doesn't have to be a positional leadership.
That's so good.
It can be a position of influence. And a very graphic example of this type thing is, imagine a 5th or 6th grade classroom, and the teacher's trying to conduct class, but there's a wise guy in the back.
Oh, yeah. And
nobody's paying attention to the teacher, and everybody's laughing at the wise guy. Who's the leader in this situation? Who's leading? Oh. And more than one time in life, I found myself realizing that there was somebody else that was actually leading the pack than the people that were supposed to be leading.
That's good. Alex?
Okay, second question. How can a leader fail?
Oh, my.
Easy. You fail with good intentions. You can be doing the right things and fail.
Well, first off, let's be honest. Every leader is going to fail.
Yes.
You're not going to win every time. Absolutely. You will have moments of failure. However, I think that the big fails are probably because it's like David when he did not go to battle. He neglected to take care of certain responsibilities. And I think if a leader stops leading, if a leader stops dreaming, if a leader stops empowering, and a leader can't go on hold. You can't lead from a motionless position. And when a leader stops growing, when a leader stops stretching himself, when a leader stops empowering others, then he may not have failed by a public failure yet, but there will be a leadership fail when he stops doing the things he's supposed to do.
I think a scriptural analogy, or really principle, not just an analogy, is the small foxes spoil the vine. It's the little things that you let creep in, whether it be pleasure, whether it be, I don't know, taking a day off, and then that leads to 2 days off, and then that leads to just getting to the office late, leaving early, whatever the small foxes is for each of us. When we let the small details and the small disciplines slip in our life, that's when failure sets in. Because face it, there is a point of failure, but the process of failure does not begin at the point of failure. The process of failure begins much, much sooner than that.
We've talked about this here. When you see someone having a big day or a big time in their life, and it's a huge moment, when they're having this moment of success, They just didn't get up this morning and become that successful person. In reality, to have this huge win today, it's because there was 1,000 small wins that built up to this big day. And if it works for the sake of wins and success, the same principle works for a leader that fails. When this big failure takes place, in all reality, the failure happened 1,000 decisions ago. And nobody just wakes up today and says, well, today I'm becoming a failure.
So I think you mentioned this, I think as soon as Alex asked the question, is failure is inevitable. We're all going to fail. So there's two types of failure. We could talk about moral failure, which I think that's a whole nother discussion. But when it comes to just failing, dropping the ball, let's keep it practical for this conversation. I think there's great freedom whenever you recognize that I'm going to fail. There's a podcast that I've listened to some, and I'll just give it a free plug. Don't leave this episode to go listen to that. And it might not, I'm not very familiar with the guys who host the podcast, so it might be a bad recommendation on their character. But I love the concept of it. The podcast is called Freedom to Fail, and it's a business podcast. Like, had Edison not failed all those times before he created the light bulb, imagine how different the world would be. We are here today because of men failing. You know, one day Edison's lab exploded, burned down, and he didn't know what he was going to do. He didn't know. I had this big failure, you know. It didn't burn down because of him, but he found himself in a heap of rubble. How are we going to move forward? Well, because Edison had the reputation of being a hard worker and a dreamer. A guy by the name of Gerald Ford came by and said, I'm going to give you all this money, and I want you to rebuild exactly what you had and keep going and just pay me back when you can. Failure is sometimes going to bring you to a point of rubble. But if you fail, if you make leadership mistakes, if you have a business that falls, if you make a personnel mistake or whatever it is in your life or in your career, but you do it with a pure heart and with a good reputation, you'll always be able to get back up, and you'll take that failure and you won't sit in the ashes of failure, but you'll learn from it and you'll build something much greater. Failure is not always bad.
No, John Maxwell has the book that we fail forward.
Oh, that's so.
And if we're going to, failure is inevitable.
Yeah.
We just have to decide when we fail, we're going to fall backwards, we're going to fall forward.
That's so good.
Which direction we go in? We have that choice.
I can preach that right now.
Let's go.
Go ahead, Ellie.
Okay, so that question led into the next one. The next one's, how do you measure success, or how do you define success?
Oh, wow. Goodness gracious. Go ahead, Dad. Let me think.
Well, I have a church growth philosophy that I share with people. That a lot of times people say, well, how's it going? And I'll kind of pick up a little bit of a country twang when I say this, and I'll say, well, we got more a coming than is a going.
Yeah.
And I think that you define success not by what everybody else might call success, but you have to say, at the end of the day, we're better than we were.
Yeah. So success, like we can find ourselves successful and not be what people think are successful. Like, think of the parable of the talent. The guy was burying that talent. He was burying that money so he wouldn't lose it. And that wasn't what God wanted. The culture says the principle of the kingdom, and this is for kingdom-minded people in business and in ministry. If you're going to serve and work and advance a greater kingdom, then we don't hold on to things. We release things. And sometimes success means that we have to let go from the church world. Some of our best people we can't keep at Conroe Church. We're going to have to send out. And that's going to hurt in that moment. That's not going to make us feel successful. But when you think from the big picture, like, I'm not trying to build a kingdom at Conroe Church. I'm trying to help Conroe Church build the kingdom of God. And so sometimes we have to lose people. Sometimes our bottom line, our membership number will get smaller. But what happens when we release people and send people is they are now in a place to where they can really be effective and God's purpose for their life.
So your analogy with the parable of the talents, then a failure would be the person who wants to bury that talent, who wants to keep things like they are, who wants to not risk releasing and not take the risk of investing in tomorrow. So they bury the talent. They want to keep things like they've always been. They don't want, a change is a good word here. They don't want to risk this talent not looking exactly like it looks on the day of reckoning. And so they bury that. But a person who succeeds is going to be secure enough in themselves that they're going to take the risk. Somebody took a chance on me. Somebody took a chance on every leader. But that's just it. You take chances. You risk. You're not unwise, but you take risk. And if you never take that risk, the people who took the 5 and 10 talents, they risk and put that talent into the kingdom. They put it to work. They allowed it to grow. And so they received more. And I think that a protectionist, defensive manner of leading is not leading. It's actually failing.
Yeah. So the question was, how do we define success, or what does success look like?
How do you measure success? So, like, what are you using to measure, like, for yourself? And then how do you define success?
Yeah. Okay. So those are.
I think those are kind of like.
That's very practical, but it's also very ambiguous because it's different for every leader.
Mm-hmm.
I think probably, and this isn't trying to be overly generic, but I think success is movement towards your goal. Like, and we can mistake movement for busyness. Like, they're not the same. Like, I can move a lot and be busy, but I'm not moving closer to the goal. But when I get closer to the goal, for our application, it's church growth. I've set a goal. I'm not going to say it here, but I set it on our leadership channel on Slack, a number by the end of the year. Mm-hmm. That's a goal. Now, there's practical ways that we're doing that. We have Friends and Family Day. There's our follow-up processes here that we're always defining. So you have to build, going back to the difference between a manager and a visionary leader, is we have to build a process that ties where we are to where we want to go and bridges that gap. Yeah. So in business, it's, okay, I want to have this many employees, or I want to create a good that services this part of the market. So how do I do that? Well, if you have the idea but don't have the ability, you have to network. In church work, if we want to grow our church to a certain number, and numbers are just numbers, numbers aren't the ultimate authority of success. But face it, every one is a number, so numbers do matter. You have to value, here at Conroe Church, we have to value the importance of every person who takes time to come to Conroe Church. And our success is based off of making them feel like they are important. And not just feel like they are important, but getting them in touch with a God who can change their life. And it's hard. I'm trying to answer this from a business standpoint, but also a spiritual standpoint. Dad, do you have anything?
There's a story where the husbandman, or the Lord, was passing by, and he told the person in charge of the garden to cut down a tree. And that person didn't want to cut down the tree, and he asked for permission for another year to fertilize it and work with it another year. As a leader, I have felt like that if I can just keep working with this, and I can keep trying this over and do the same thing, that's the right thing. But sometimes the Lord expects us to do what he said, and by doing that, you may find yourself where you're cutting down a tree every now and then. And to cut down a tree, at the end of the day, that doesn't feel like success when you've had to make a hard decision, and that decision affects people, and that decision might affect the other numbers of your church, membership, contributions, on a number of, size of your youth group, all of these numbers. Sometimes our most successful moments are the moments that we have been truly obedient to God and done the difficult thing. And that day when that man finally was willing to cut that tree down, what he did in that moment was he was doing something that ensured his success for tomorrow, because he was dealing with an unfruitful tree. But by removing that unfruitful tree, he placed himself in a place where tomorrow is going to be very successful and be very fruitful, because he made room. He made room for a fruitful tree to be planted and to grow. In this place, there was an unfruitful tree. So sometimes, if you're going to try to define success by what it looks like today might be the day you had to cut down something unfruitful. Today might be the day that you wept and cried because something bad happened. But in all reality, it's again at the end of the day, if you've done what God said to do, that is a successful day. And I promise you, if you do this long enough, your measurements of all the numbers that we measure with, at the end of the day, if you'll keep doing what God says do, eventually the numbers are going to reflect. Man's measurements are going to reflect the success with time. But you cannot say today was a success or failure until you look back and say the actions of that day helped us be better than we were.
Yeah. So I'll say this. I'll piggyback on that, talking about the tree that had to cut down because it wasn't bearing fruit. Healthy things grow. So if you want to be successful, create a culture that's healthy. And I think that leads into the next question. Throwing it at you right there, boom. She wasn't ready.
Hey, I like this. Healthy things grow.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Healthy things grow. Since she's looking for her question,
Yeah.
Imagine, and then if healthy things are going to grow, then if we've improved the health of this thing in some way, that's a successful day.
Yeah, healthy marriages grow; they produce offspring. Healthy churches grow; they produce children, babies, new believers. Healthy businesses grow because the culture inside is something that people outside want to align with and partner with. For instance, there's times, we'll protest a brand because they do something that we don't like. They make a political statement or they make a contribution to a nonprofit that we've seen as ungodly or unrighteous, and we'll protest them. The culture, we don't like that culture. We don't like what they're doing, and so we will abstain. So if we can create this is such a good leadership question. If you can be the best that you can be, and I can be the best that I can be, and we invest ourselves into the people around us and encourage them to do the same, the culture is set, and we're going to grow. So it really becomes very personal. Success is me doing the small things correctly.
Mighty good, mighty good.
Okay, so the next few questions are more practical leadership questions.
Practical.
Yes, so just
No,
your take on it.
No
So,
Jesus jukes, no scripture.
I mean, how do you handle conflict within your team?
Oh,
Conflict. What's conflict, Dad?
I think that I think when you're saying conflict, is this also including criticism?
Yeah, we have another question we can kind of put
So
together.
don't talk about criticism.
Okay.
I'll talk
Okay.
about personnel conflict.
You will always have conflict.
Yep.
I mean, the only thing that doesn't have conflict is something that's dead. And so, if you've got any sort of life, there's going to be conflict. So, what you have to do is you have to accept the fact there's going to be conflict, and then everybody has to decide that we're going to do the very best for the whole. And so when there is a conflict, it's got to be resolved scripturally. I think you've got to apply into every situation the whole golden rule. That's got to be a part of your daily conversation, that we're going to treat others in the way that we want to be treated. If what Paul said, we should treat others better than we treat ourselves. Jesus says we should, treat our brothers as we would treat ourselves. So we have to be willing in conflict. Everyone has got to be willing to not insist on their way. And as a leader, there's times that I know what I would like to see, but when there's a team and the team consensus is a little different, I'm more than willing for the team to do that because they're going to actually be doing the work anyway. So I feel like that to resolve a conflict, first off, we have to resolve conflict. Anything that we ignore is going to only be worse tomorrow. So integrity says if there's a problem, we fix this problem. Now, so we have to go through a process of fixing these problems. We've got to talk. Maybe we should do less talking and more listening.
That's good.
And if we listened more, but there's also when there's this conflict arise that we may find ourselves having to go to someone. We may find ourselves having to make the first step, take the first move.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Proactive versus reactive.
Well, not just that. Sometimes you have to apologize.
Oh, yeah.
If there's conflict, that means there's more than one opinion. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you just have to say, I'm sorry. The week after the church elected Katie and I to be pastor here, I was out of town for a meeting. I was driving back in town. I got a phone call. Someone wanted to meet with me. And I said, okay, I'll be in town such and such time. He said, there's a problem. So I said, okay, I'll be in town and we'll meet. And so we met, and the person was very upset and very angry. And I was very nervous because I didn't even have time to really have good conversation, and I didn't know what he was upset about and all that. But the first thing I said is, I'm sorry. And it diffused the whole situation. Now, there's been times that I didn't do that and the situation blew up. But I think if you want to resolve a conflict, swallow your pride and just say, I'm sorry. And I'm sorry goes a long way. Face it, the faster that I say I'm sorry to Kayla, the better my life is going to be.
Soft answer turns away wrath.
Yes. And sometimes you apologize because you were wrong. Sometimes you apologize not because you were wrong, but the manner in which you approached something made someone feel uncomfortable or gave a wrong impression. So you apologize for how you made people feel. You can have sometimes leadership requires difficult conversations and difficult decisions to be made. And sometimes, a lot of times, I'm not perfect in making the delivery of the decision. Mm-hmm. And so I have to apologize not for the decision, but how I delivered the decision. Conflict resolution is a lot of times, I'm sorry.
So going off of that and delivery, how do you implement some change within a process or within your team? I know yesterday we had a meeting about wanting to raise some expectations with one of our teams here at Conroe Church, and I know I was super scared and I was super terrified of trying not to offend someone when we're trying to raise the bar here, but you're still doing a good job, but we're just trying to raise expectations. So I know that's something I deal with, trying not to be offensive in those settings because, someone's a team member and they're passionate about something and, you're trying to raise the bar and they're doing a great job. But how do you communicate that?
I think you have to be real and be we're going to change what we're doing and how we're doing this. And I'm not coming at you because you're the problem. Mm-hmm. I'm coming to let you know that I have allowed something to go so long that now we found ourselves in a rut. And what we're doing is good, but what we're doing is not going to allow us or this team or this ministry or this job, it's not going to allow us to get to the next level of excellence that our vision and mission requires us to get to. And yesterday, I'll just say this publicly, I texted you late last night too, but that was awesome because you built people up before you offered any criticism. And it wasn't really a criticism. It was constructive. This is what we're doing and this is good, but it can be better if we do this. So sometimes you just have to take the road of, face it, everything rises and falls on leadership. So we have to take personal responsibility and then call others up to the level of excellence that we ourselves have already risen to.
Because in this process, if we don't have that hard conversation, if we don't challenge people to come up to the next level, then we've stopped leading. We're accepting the.
We got somebody outside, Dad, so we'll have to come back to this.
No, we're good. We just got a camera that's about to die. You can keep going.
Oh, a camera's about to die. Oh, okay.
Okay.
So we'll keep going.
Well, we keep going, and if one of us disappears off a camera,
this is in the moment when everybody in the office is not in the office. We're all upstairs. All right. So we're going to lose y'all's camera. All right. I'll just cut all this out. So let's just go to the next question, and I'll cut all that out.
Okay. So the next question is, how do you handle criticism from one of your team members, particularly things said possibly behind your back?
Okay. This is one that actually I feel very comfortable answering, because when you come to the reality and you're secure enough in yourself that criticism no longer bothers you, you have to ask yourself, why is it not bothering me? But the truth is every criticism, there will be a thread of truth in every single criticism, Alex. So what you're doing is not all bad, but somebody has now offered criticism. So instead of just saying, oh, that's just who they are, you think, what did they say? And we find that thread of criticism, that thread of truth in the criticism, and then we improve on that. Whatever that thread of truth is, we improve that. We fix that. In essence, you remove the criticism. You don't respond to their criticism. You don't flash back. You don't say, well, this is what you do. No, you respond simply, not verbally, but you remove the criticism. You listen to what they said, and then you decide, okay, I'm going to be better than this, and they're not going to criticize me twice on this, because I'm going to remove this criticism by overcoming it.
Also, yes to all of that, but the last part of the question is something that I don't like at all, when the criticism is behind my back. That's unhealthy. That's toxic. And we have to get to the point to where we're okay with having difficult conversations. We don't like it, but if you have a problem with me, come to me. Mm-hmm. Because if I have a problem with you, Alex, I'm coming to you. Like, we haven't had any. We're still pretty new in this working relationship, but there will be an issue. You're going to have an issue with me. I'm going to have an issue with you. Sometimes Dad and I have conflict. Sometimes we have things, and we can't talk to anybody else. We have to talk to each other. And that's just kind of the culture that we have here. And it's not always easy and it's not always comfortable, but that's just kind of how I am. If there's an issue, I'm not going to talk behind your back about it. I might talk to Kayla. I might get advice about it, but I'm not going to gossip about something. I'm not going to have a critical spirit. There's a difference between being a critical person and offering constructive criticism. Babe, I feel like you have something to say here.
Yeah, I don't like confrontation whatsoever. I hate dealing with confrontation. But at the same time, I'm not going to let that hang over my head. So I may take a week or 2 or 3 or 4 and get myself ready for it. Because I hate confrontation, I get emotional about it. And, like, I'll even start crying. But I have my personality. I have to get myself ready but my attitude. Get my attitude, because I don't want to confront the situation with that same bad attitude.
Yeah, that's so good.
So I've got to get myself ready, but then I do have to confront the situation. Whatever it may be, hey, let's work this out.
Yeah. So there, confrontation done right is not offensive. Confrontation done right builds morale and strengthens the team.
But you've got to take this a step further. As a leader, if you're not approachable,
That's right.
you are going to encourage this discussion to happen behind your back. I've always said that we have an open door policy. You can always walk through the door of this office and we can talk about it. And so if you have a healthy enough atmosphere and a strong enough, and you're secure enough in yourself that you're not threatened by the criticisms of others, that you can actually have these discussions, then that becomes extremely healthy, that you listen, you receive what's being said, you improve on it, and you go forward. But if you're not approachable, if that door is locked and closed, if that's the inner sanctum and it's a holy place and people are fearful of your reactions and they don't want to say anything because that you bark a little bit, then you're creating an atmosphere. A nice modern word is toxic. You create a toxic atmosphere to where that people are afraid to approach. They're afraid to be honest. And so they're going to vent this stuff.
That's right.
And so it needs to be vented to the right place and to the right people. So as a leader, you have the choice. I can be approachable or I can be a totalitarian, and it's going to come out somewhere.
I think just one last thing on this before we move on, it goes back to culture. Like a lot of this, there's always going to be conflict. There's always going to be some criticism. That's just the human nature. But as a leader, a big part of our job is just to be self-aware and listen. You know, like before service, I'm trying to be out walking around, just shaking hands and hugging people and loving them. And what I'm doing is I'm watching with my eyes, but I'm also listening with my ears. And a lot of times, if you're just aware from a leadership perspective, we get our leadership team together here at the holiday season that we're entering into in a month or two. We're going to have a lot of church socials. And when we're all together in rooms outside, yes, also in this building, but also in other houses and other venues, listen and create a fun space and be the leader that people are comfortable being around. If they're comfortable being around you, they're going to be comfortable talking to you.
Yeah. Okay. Next question.
I feel comfortable being around y'all.
You better.
Tips on how to delegate tasks, especially tasks I can do on my own.
Oh, this is so hard, Alex.
Yeah, due to my own personal standard.
Yeah.
So this is a question that I thought of. How do I learn to accept their 90% versus my 100%?
That's so good,
That is
Alex.
coming from a totally humble attitude.
Yeah,
Well,
I got it.
Here
Not
you
like-
are.
I feel that way too.
The young pastor Trent is moaning and groaning because this is hard.
It's a hard lesson to learn. I'm learning
It's a
it.
hard lesson to learn. When I was many years younger, I struggled with this. The more I've matured and aged, the more happy I am with that. I don't mind delegating anything. As a matter of fact, I delegate everything. I think the weakness of one who gets comfortable with delegation is he needs to remember to follow up to those that he's delegated. But to be able, I think we talked about something along these lines 2 or 3 weeks ago, that we've got to be willing to say, okay, if I don't delegate and if I insist on doing this myself, then I am depriving this person the opportunity of growth in themselves. And I need to be able to accept that my way might be the perfect way, or at least what I think is perfect, what I'm expecting. But, you know, if I never place anyone else in the position to try to do this, then the whole world's going to sit back and let me do it forever. And so you have to make the decision. I either do this for the rest of my life, and even when I'm dead and gone, they're going to have to bring me back to keep doing this, or I delegate it, and these people will grow. And the fact of the matter is, when you delegate it out, they will become masters of that, and they will take it further than you can take it yourself.
What I have to tell myself almost every day, and it's an original with me, but when I heard it, I loved it. And then the more I thought about it, the more I love it and I hate it at the same time, because our age and our place in life is we want to go fast. We have a big dream, we have a big goal, and if we're going to do it, we got to do it quickly, because Jesus is coming back. Come on, somebody. But I heard this: if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go with people. And so that's something that it's so much easier said on this podcast. But a moment of vulnerability is something that I'm having to learn and walk out right now. And when you say that, Alex, like you asked the question, how do I accept something that's not as good that I can do on my own? And then you said, I'm coming from a humble place. I'm not trying to be rude or arrogant and think like you shouldn't have to clarify that, number one. But number two, the fact is because church work is our nature and our passion and all we do. Whenever we leave here today, you're probably going to talk with your friends about church work.
Yeah.
Or you'll text us and we'll probably hang out tonight. Are you coming to family night? I don't know. But tonight we'll probably talk about church work. It's all we do. So naturally it's not that we're better than everybody else, because in the world of church work, we have a long ways to go and a lot to learn. But for the people that come to church here, they're not as passionate about some of the things that we're passionate about. And so we have to show them the why. This is why we do it. And recognize that it's going to take them a while. This is why I love series, because if I preach a theme for 1 week, they're going to forget it Monday. Why? Because I'm going to forget it by Tuesday. They might even forget it before they pull off the campus. But preaching a series, it's the same theme, it's the same topic, approached 3 or 4, sometimes 5, depending on the weeks, 5 different times from 5 different angles, and it gets ingrained in people's thought process. So we have to be patient with people and just be very repetitive, and they'll get there. Babe, what do you have?
What do I have?
Yeah, do you have a contribution?
No. I'm worried about this camera.
That's so funny.
I'm worried about my camera.
Oh, it's so funny.
So, to take that answer just a step further, Alex.
Hang on a second. I thought she had something on her mind. And she said, I got nothing.
Not on that one.
Go ahead, Dad.
Okay. You've just mentioned about that's all we talk about. That's all we do. This is there's a biblical character. There's a family. It was the house of Stephanus. And the New Testament mentions that they had addicted themselves to the house of God. And there are people that will addict themselves, allow church, allow the kingdom to become their addiction. And these are good. And at the same time, those that have taken on that addiction, it's really hard to be patient with others that are not quite so addicted. And while someone who has this addiction for the house of God, they may give 110% all the time. It's very difficult for somebody that's giving more than they've got all the time to be patient with somebody that's running at 60%.
Yeah, that's good.
And so, but we have to learn, say, if I can just be patient, if I can help them, if I can let them do this, it's not going to be quite what I wanted, but it's going to be better than if it didn't get done at all. Mm-hmm. And then they begin to grow, and then they will soon do it better than you can do it now, which puts the leader back in the position. He's got to constantly grow, and he's got to constantly stretch himself. And when the top leader stops stretching, you can expect that when he no longer expects himself to grow, the people that are doing the more menial task in the organization, they will cease to stretch themselves and grow as well. So we have to allow them. We have to create a venue for them to grow. And sometimes it's a word called trust. And how do you trust somebody that's disappointed you in the past?
Wow, that's good.
So they fell short the last time, but I'm trusting them again. It's not
You
easy.
give them that olive branch.
I think there's the mercy and grace again.
There was
There it
Kayla's
is.
contribution. WWJD. That's great. Did we answer that
Yep.
sufficiently?
Okay, we're gonna switch gears here for a couple questions. These are like more relational. So this is really intense. How did you know that your spouse was the one? And was there a specific moment that you knew?
A few days ago, we had my dad on here, and he told us that he stole my mother from another man because he knew she was the one. I didn't know that he stole my mother. I didn't.
Clarification: she wasn't married. If you hadn't listened to that episode,
she wasn't married. She wasn't. They weren't married, but he says I stole her from the front seat of another man. How do you know? It still has great effect on Kayla.
that was so funny.
It sounds so bad.
Okay, I laughed really hard when you asked this question, and here's the clarification because I want Kayla to answer this before I answer.
Gosh.
Talk to me, babe. How'd you know that I was the one?
I feel like this is like a whole episode in itself.
Don't tell the story, but just kind of.
No, we're not gonna. No,
I haven't heard the story. Tell it to us.
Why would I do that to myself? Okay, so short answer. Do we have 5 hours? No, we don't. Okay, so short answer. Trent and I went the last pause that we had.
Last pause.
This is so good.
I had y'all, seriously, this needs to be another episode.
Just give us Cliff Notes.
I had to work out things in myself. I knew what I wanted in a guy, things. I knew that that person had to be a strong leader because, well, I'm not going to give reasons why. I'm pretty strong. But so I wanted someone that I didn't want someone that I was going to have to lead that person and drag them by their feet, that they were going to lead me further than what I could do. And I knew I had that in Trent, but then there were also things that I had to work out within myself. And once I didn't have that, I saw what all he did have as far as him leading me and everything else. And I knew that was the one.
I think that, so our love story is pretty funny. That needs to be a podcast episode, actually.
No, it don't.
It's pretty funny. But
How many pauses did y'all take?
we dated for 3 years but it was a span of 3 years, but we dated for a year and a half. This is why it needs to be an episode.
Okay. How did you know?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get to. Family's a big deal. Culture's a big deal. Family culture. And face it, culture is not just color of our skin. Like there's people that are the same race that are different culturally. And that's one thing that I'm very thankful about here at Conroe Church, and even just society as a whole, specifically the apostolic movement, is you are seeing more interracial marriages. I think that's awesome. I think if you do that just to say you did that, that's wrong, though. That's racism in reverse. But so culture is a big deal, and our family cultures match. We both come from very big families. We both come from families that were ministry minded. Kayla's dad was an evangelist. Her grandpa was a pastor for years and years and years in Louisiana and in South Texas. So asking her to come in my world was a big ask because I knew where I was going. And in that last pause, I made up in my mind that I wasn't going to pursue music anymore. I was pursuing ministry. And that's when I made the transition to Bible school. And so that was a big ask. But I knew that she had the goods in her because I'd seen her family. And I saw that she was a strong person. Not only was she beautiful and sweet, but that's a brownie point moment right there, babe. But she was strong and tenacious and with what God's doing. And at that point, I didn't know if I was going to pastor Conroe Church or lead Conroe. I mean, I didn't know that really till 2019, 2020, and that's when God started solidifying that stuff in us, and we began having those conversations. But I just knew that she had the tenacity to climb a mountain and to conquer big things, and that was very attractive to me. I don't know if that's very spiritual. I don't know if you're looking for spiritual, but that's what I was after.
I will climb the mountain and sing all the way to
It's going to be a fun climb, like because climbing a mountain's hard. There's going to be bad days, so you got to have somebody that's going to sing the Sound of Music in the passenger seat with you, like Kayla. Go ahead, Dad.
Yes.
I think for me it was again, our families were friends. Our fathers went to Bible school together. Matter of fact, I met her at Texas Bible College.
Her dad introduced y'all?
No, she was 5 years old and I was 7 years old. That's where our relationship started. And so we had this long family history. They were not strangers. We understood culture. And then even though our parents' ministries took them in very different directions when the time was right, there was not a whole lot of things to settle within ourselves and between us, because so much of who and what we had always been growing up in our family cultures, it was already, and our families already would spend time together, spend holidays together. So as a result, we didn't have to settle a whole lot of those type things. It was just a natural. And so as a result, we've now been together for, well, she was 5 and I was 7. That's a long time.
That's a long time, Dad.
Okay, so this month in October, Conroe Church is focusing on the family. And we have a question. What does devotion in your home look like with your children? What do you do to instill Christian morals and scripture into them outside of Sunday school? And what resources could you recommend?
I just bought, I bought this at the beginning of this year, the Action Bible. Yeah. So cool. Mm-hmm. Like, I've gotten messages out of the Action Bible, like, because it presents, it's huge. It's the whole Bible, but it's like a comic book. But like the verbiage and how it gets on my kids' level is unbelievable, and it's opened Scripture up even to me in a new way of understanding. Mm-hmm. So we do that. We're not perfect with every night devotion, but we try to do. The past week, I'll be honest, we haven't. It's been just a crazy time. But we are very intentional. This is something that I try to teach, and Dad has really taught me kind of this, Mom and Dad. But I can't let Sunday school teachers disciple my kids for 1 hour a week. So that's 52 hours a year when there's thousands of hours in the year. Like, it's not my children, it's not Conroe Church's job to be the sole discipleship avenue for my children, even though my life revolves around Conroe Church and making this place great. It is my responsibility to disciple and teach my kids. And Kayla is really good at this. Kayla holds my feet to the fire with home discipleship and home devotion time. And so, babe, why don't you talk a little bit about what you do?
It is very important that your kids hear you pray.
Yes.
Very important. And I can remember hearing my dad pray, my mom pray, my grandparents when I was little. And honestly, how I pray, I feel like at times I catch myself, oh my goodness, I just sounded like my mama, or, I just sounded like my dad with saying that. But it really affects you. And I can hear Kinley praying.
Oh my goodness, yes.
And it's such a childlike way, but he is such a prayer warrior, and he talks to God as if God is seriously sitting right beside him, and he's having a conversation with him. But there's so much passion in that. And I've thought there's many times that I will stop praying just because I want to hear what he is saying. But and I'm not pinning a rose on us, but had we not done that when they were little, they wouldn't know how to do that now at the ages of 10, 8, and 7. So praying with them and hearing you pray is very, very, very important.
Something else that we do that I think is significant that I don't think we've ever even talked about, babe, is since that we built our house and moved in, we have a living room upstairs. Upstairs is the kids. Upstairs is their domain. It's their living room. It's decorated for them. It's their place. And that's where we have our family devotion is in their space.
Yeah.
We go to them. We don't expect them to come to us. We go to where they're at. I'm not reading out of the King James Bible. I know we've got some King James only people that listen, and I'm not trying to be offensive, but we read the Bible and we share with them stories and principles. Outside of Bible reading, very practical. My kids are in public school. They see things and hear things that are blowing mine and Kayla's mind, and we're having some big conversations about that right now with what the future of our children's education looks like. But we're just having, because of where culture's at, where it's at, and they're seeing some crazy things, not just from their friends, but from faculty and staff. We're having to be very matter of fact about right and wrong. And we think we weren't prepared to have some of these conversations as early as we're having them. Our oldest is 10. But culture's not giving us any other option. And so I think for Christian families, ministry and outside of ministry, we have to be proactive with our children because the devil's being proactive. And we can't, if we give the devil an inch, he'll take a mile. Dad, you have anything?
At my place in life, looking backwards, the question was devotions with family, kids. Of course, there's not many kids around our house anymore, but looking back, I think I can be candid, honest enough to say I wish I had done more, wish I had done better. However, if there was a strength that we offered our kids was going to be the consistency of right is right and wrong is wrong.
Dad, I can hear you and Mom praying right now. I remember one time, oh God, we were living at Piney Shores. And looking back, that's probably
Piney Point out there in the
Piney
country.
Point,
Yeah.
not Piney Shores, yeah. And we're in house, and you were one night you were weeping and sobbing. Your face was in the pillow in the middle of the living room, and I heard you praying. And those moments are powerful. Mm-hmm. So I know probably the nature of all parenting is we wish we would have done more. You know, I look back. You know, when my kids were younger, I wish I would have done more. And they're still young. They're not even teenagers yet. But I think while we could all do more, that what you did was good. And, like, hearing your voice and all that, hearing Mom praying, we may not have gathered together like we wanted to all the time because of the nature of where life was for us as a family. But what you did was effective and powerful, and I'll never forget it.
Well, at least you're still hanging around. And then,
So
the desire to wish we had done probably a little better. However, the very importance that what was right had to be right and rules didn't change. And I think one of the pitfalls that I was observing was so many of my peers were having a different set of rules for their family than they had for their church. And I was very affected by that, and I was very determined as a parent that if it was good for church folk, it was good for preacher folk. And so that's one thing that we endeavored to drive into you. And at least to model, and then maybe along the way, we left enough example, left enough crumbs along the way that our kids have, well, everybody's living for God right now, so thank God.
That's good. That's deep, Alex.
Here's moving on to ministry questions. What do boundaries look like as a pastor? Being approachable and real.
It's just going to be on y'all now. Our camera did die.
Wah, wah,
Yeah,
wah.
so.
Okay.
What do boundaries look like as a pastor? Being approachable and real while having lines set to protect yourself and your family.
Boundaries. Read that one more time, Alex, so I can get it in my mind.
What do boundaries look like as a pastor? Being approachable and real while still having lines set to protect yourself and your family.
Go ahead, Dad. I'm thinking.
Well,
You gotta break that one down.
We've talked about being approachable, okay? So I don't want to even address that right now, but I'll give you a life experience that caused me to make major decisions of some lines that I'll never cross again. And in earlier days, we weren't able to do a whole lot, and when we would have somebody to look after the kids, we would try to go for dinner somewhere. Of course, we had to drive into Houston in those times. And so I remember one time we had managed to finally wrangle a date night. I mean, if you had somebody to watch the kids in those days, you might not have enough money to go to the Whataburger or go to Burger King. So it was one of those rare moments when we could afford to go somewhere and we had someone to look after the kids. And it was a very, very rare moment. And we had it was like maybe the first year we had cell phones. So this was 20 years or so ago, and maybe a little longer. And we're headed towards our place that our little restaurant we're going to, and the phone rings. And someone had to talk to me right now, and it couldn't wait. It had to be right now, and it was desperate, and they were waiting at the church on me. So I did what a good pastor would do. I pulled off the freeway, and I U-turned, and I headed back. And when I pulled onto this parking lot, I stepped into one of the biggest crises and storms. Because when I came back, what was waiting on me was accusations against myself and your mother. They were ugly. They were nasty accusations, and it didn't go away. And it went on for some time until we actually had to involve the law, because it was nasty, and it went on from that point. It went on for a few weeks, and I turned around from the little bit of escape that we were having. We were going to have a dinner together and going on a date, and it didn't work out. And I came back, and I chose at that point to come back to the church, and not knowing what I was stepping into. And I forfeited that night, that few moments of recreation with that we had planned. I determined from that night forward that never again would I stop the few moments of escape that we had as a couple. I would never forfeit that again for something at the church. Now, there's times that if there's a funeral or something, you have to make these adjustments. And as a result, and I've lived that now for 20-something years. And a year or so back, we were headed on an annual vacation, and we're at the airport, and I've put my credit card into the robot machine to print out my stickers for my luggage. And as I put it in, and I'm getting the stickers, the phone rings, and we have a member of the church that's passed away. And so I'm sitting there, and as those stickers are printing out, I'm asking myself the question: do I get on this plane and leave for this 4 or 5 days for this getaway, or do I go home? And coming into my mind was that commitment I made to myself all those years ago. And so literally, we got on that airplane and left. And because we had to establish some things that we'll sacrifice on many different levels for the church, but there were also times when we have to take care of ourselves. And I say it this way, and probably on the podcast I mentioned that, to be able to be creative or to be recreative or to be able to lead, you first have got to recreate. There's times you've got to stop, you've got to unplug, you've got to rest, and you've got to recreate before you can recreate. And so from that point forward, I've determined that there are certain lines or certain things within my family that I'm not going to cede over to a responsibility of Conroe Church and other people. Because usually when I give up those moments, it was not very pretty.
Yeah. This is a hard question, Alex. Because ministry is 100% being approachable and accessible. And it's not that you don't have boundaries, but a shepherd that doesn't smell like sheep isn't a very good shepherd. And that's something that I've learned from Dad, and he's been very good at. But there's times like Kayla was fussing at me last night about some stuff that I have to get better at with our family. But we have to, I say fussing, she was making me aware. I don't want to make it sound like we were arguing.
She was ministering.
She was ministering. She was helping me out. She really was. It was constructive. I didn't like it, but it was constructive. But boundaries are, I struggle with it. If I'm honest, I struggle with it. But my family time is my family time. And there's been times that I've got urgent text messages of people maybe not happy or something going on, and I just had to say, I'm with my family, I'll get back to you. And then there's sometimes that I just don't answer the phone and I don't answer the text message. When I can remember times on vacation, I think probably Dad learned from this, especially like the story that you just gave when you came back. But there was times we would be on vacation and Dad would have to work a lot, have to take a lot of phone calls. And I remember being a kid, how much that frustrated me. I didn't hold resentment against Dad. Those days we didn't have an assistant. We didn't have anybody here to manage. So Dad had to do that. But things are different now. And if I'm on vacation, Dad's probably not. Next week we're both out of town. That's very rare for us both to be out of town. Same spot, same week. But it's very rare. So when I'm out of town or when I'm on vacation or taking a day off, I try to not talk to people about work stuff. And it's not easy, but I have to draw the line in the boundary. Do you have anything that you want to add, babe?
Well, as far as our kids, if we don't have those lines and those boundaries and we don't show them the proper attention, they're going to get it from elsewhere.
Yeah.
And we, this is kind of going back to the previous question just a little bit, but we let our kids watch YouTube. And back in the summertime, and it's not, that they were watching anything bad. It wasn't. I had felt like I had it monitored, and so far, knock on wood, they've never seen anything inappropriate. But some of those videos they would watch okay, we don't live the same lifestyle. And, not that it was anything bad, but you could just tell it was two different lifestyles. And so in July, we made that hard decision. And I knew that this was going to be probably harder on us as parents to say, okay, we're stopping YouTube. And so, but I noticed a difference in our kids and how they were acting. And I knew that we had to draw that line of, okay, no, it's not going to be just on the weekends. When you're not in school, we had to draw the line that, hey, we're stopping this because this is not what we're about. And I'm not criticizing anybody who does this, at all. And it was hard for the first couple weeks. It was not pretty at all in our home. But looking at how my kids react and their attitude and how much better they do with one another. Now, they're not perfect. They're still siblings and they still fight. But an overall in their attitude has completely shifted.
Yeah.
Completely shifted. I mean, I felt for a little while that they were actually being desensitized by certain things. And now, it's like it's completely reversed So sometimes drawing those boundaries and those lines are really hard, and they're not going to be easy.
Yeah, so we have to draw internal boundaries like that. We made the decision to stop YouTube. And that was a decision we made internally for our family. And likewise, that enables us to make boundaries separating church and work, which is hard to do because we live in a glass house. And that's something that we're still walking out and trying to figure out. But boundaries, if I don't draw the line, that means I'm allowing the people of the church, and we have a great church. It's not, but in every church there are people who are always needing. Face it, some people are selfish. We have a good church, but there's always going to be one or two. And so if we don't draw that line, we allow someone else to draw that line, and then we really don't have a boundary. So
I have one more, maybe one more experience.
we probably got to hurry too. I know we got that meeting.
It was our 20th wedding anniversary, which was like 21 years ago. We were headed out of town. We had saved and scrimped, and we were going out of the country. And we were in the car leaving town when we got a phone call that said there was a financial issue that had arisen, and it was large. And I didn't have the ability to fix it, and we needed $5,000 that we didn't have, and we needed it today. And I was headed out of town. And so my inclination was, oh, well, scrap the trip. I got to fix this. And but I remembered my other lessons that I had learned. And so I said, nope, we're gonna make this journey. So we went ahead and left town. And this was like on a Friday. And on Saturday, I started getting a message that I really needed to call home. And I ignored it. It was on my Sunday evening. I needed to call home. So I did. I called the secretary, and I said, I found a phone. I went and emailed. I emailed them. And the email that I got back said, I wanted you to know there was a family visiting today, and they felt impressed that they were supposed to make an investment in the Conroe Church. And they know you were gone, so they didn't know who to hand a check to. So they asked who the church secretary was, and so they've handed me a check, and I wanted you to be aware of this so you wouldn't worry about it. And it was a check for $5,000. And I left town with that on me as a burden and a worry, and it was fixed 2 days later. That taught me a lesson that when you're asking where some of the boundary lines are. For me, since that day, when I leave town, I do not call back and ask how things are. I do not. And Trent can testify to this. In the years that he's been here, how long has it been, 10, 12 years?
January will be 15 years that I've been on staff.
Okay. I've never called you one time when I'm away, how's things? Now, when Sunday morning service is going on, I might text Redona and say, hey, send me a picture of visitors, just because I'm curious about that. But as far as call home and ask how things are, check on things, ask who was missing, all that, I don't ask that question. People probably think,
picture of visitors.
Yeah. Well, because here I am, I'm listening to you. I'm listening to you on the service.
I see what you're saying.
And you're saying, well, thank you for the visitors that's in the room. And I'm 3 states away, and I'm listening. We got a visitor there today. I wonder who it is. I mean, it's not that I'm concerned about the church. I'm just nosy, all right?
You're nosy. That's what I was getting to.
So as long as Scott was with us, before he passed away, I didn't have to do that because he was sitting on the back row on his phone taking pictures of everybody that was in the room. And so I had that running dialogue, at commentary going. But I do not call home and say, hey, how are things? What's going on? Do you need me for anything? I don't ask that. That is a line that I've created, a boundary that I had to create years and years ago, and it's proven to be very beneficial for us.
That's all I got, Alex. I'm not good at this.
Any more questions for us?
Yeah, we have 2 more.
Are they the authentic questions? Can we do that as a whole episode?
Yeah.
Because I think yesterday in the office that blew up to a big conversation.
Okay.
So I know we got people going to be here. So we're rambling. We're having internal conversations for an external podcast. But thank you for watching. This is very raw, unplugged, unscripted. And if you like this, let us know. Email us, type it in the comments, get to us at church on Sunday. Let us know. And we're open to doing more of these. We really enjoy this format. Thank you, Alex. Those are excellent questions. My goodness. And so thanks, everybody, for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Tune in.